So, I was blessed this morning to be singing with Kylie. She'll tolerate me. She's a lot more talented than I am. And I started out the song, me playing the piano, and I just couldn't get it. She's like, Mom! And so finally, a week before, I'm just like, you play. And she picks it up like this. She does a great job. But the song that we're going to be singing for today is entitled Pieces. And so those of you that have been in a relationship, the trust and the bond that you have with a boyfriend, girlfriend, or your husband or wife, it takes time. And you give your heart in pieces. You don't, when you start dating someone, you don't give them everything and give your heart and soul, because that kind of freaks out the other person sometimes. Some do, and then that's kind of weird. And so we're so used to looking at the lens of a relationship through what's comfortable for us. And we give our hearts in pieces and little things. And we play this game of flirting where we're available sometimes and we're not. And we go back and forth. And it's games that we play as we develop our relationships. But God's not that way. When He loves us, He's given us everything. And He didn't hold back pieces. He gives us everything. And that's what this song is about. Amen.
Our scripture reading today is Luke 12:34. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Well, welcome. Good to see you all. Glad I'm here. Glad that you're here. And I know you're getting tired of me being here up here all day, but I haven't been here in a while. And you know, it's kind of one of those things that you know, you kind of line up the calendar, and you kind of get things set up, and then you look at it and you're like, we're not going to be in church for like 4 or 5 weeks. Man, that's like a long time, you know, and it's kind of like, I think I know how to get there. I think I know the church address. I think I know where it is. But it's good to be here. It's good to be in church. It's good to be part of the church family. And it's nice to be home. You know, my kids, Caleb and Kylie, both go to Campion. And, you know, coming into church this morning, you don't really have to say, well, where are we going to sit, or what's, you know, where are we going to be, or what do we do next, or, you know, or hey, where's the hymnal, or, you know, I mean, it's kind of good. I mean, people from outside kind of look at us sometimes, they're like, well, you know everything, what's going on, you're kind of a close-knit family, you know what's going to happen next. And those who are inside the family, no, that's a nice, comforting feeling. Most days nowadays that we talk about, you know, in Sabbath school, they're so distracted. Our society, our world, our connections, our network is so fractured. We don't interact with people. Coming home to the church, coming home to the church family, it's so nice. I know everybody. I know everybody almost as good as I know my own family. It's also nice to have Caleb and Kylie with me here, taking advantage of them and their musical talents and things. You know, I was talking to Sherry the other night, and I think I might grab a mic because I like to walk around. He's going. I was talking to Sherry the other night, and it was kind of like, you know, we stay up late, kind of, you know, watching TV or hanging out with the kids or doing something, and then I get up early to go to work, and teenagers, you know, they sleep till 10 o'clock, and so that's kind of a little bit challenging for me, and I'm like, it's kind of like being on an extended vacation because, you know, stay up late, get up early, kind of get things ready, get things going, and you know, we're doing fun things, bike riding, and you know, going out to eat and all that stuff with the kids, being in the summer. But I will have to confess just a little bit. It's so nice to have family home. It's so nice to have family around. You're kind of like, wow. Fall is coming. This is not going to always be there where my kids are going to be with me. It's not always going to be that way. And, you know, I was talking with, I think it was a camp meeting, I was talking with my uncle Merlin. He's a farmer down that direction, southeast. And, you know, as we've talked about, farmers really got kind of the short end of the stick this year. And many farmers not only are not financially doing well, but mentally not doing well. And, you know, I kind of had a good conversation with him, and he says, Merlin, this has been the toughest year of my life. He says, I have never had this much dark outlook, negative self-talk, He says every day it's going out and it's fighting the weather, and it's another calf that's freezing, and it's another cow that's dying, and it's another tractor stuck in the mud, and it's just day after day after day. He says, I don't know if I can do this anymore. He says, I think I'm done farming. And I'm like, wow, you know. I mean, he'd done that all of his life, you know, born and raised on a farm, continued on, and been that way. But, you know, in spite of being the, you know, if you didn't have the dark, cold winter, you wouldn't appreciate when your kids are home in the summer and it's fun and it's exciting. For me, it probably was one of the hardest things that I have done, is to send my kids away to school. I have many people in the hospital talking about, you send your kids away from home? Why do you do that? Are they naughty? Are they bad? Are they bad kids? They're like, oh, what did they do? You know? And then you're kind of like, well, no, we're doing this because it's good for them, or we're doing this because we want them to kind of have a more spiritual connection. You know, you don't understand when Jesus came here until you have kids. You don't really have a good idea. And I mean, I don't even have an idea. You know, God sent His Son a bazillion miles away to die. I send my kids on 5 hours away, and it's like, wow. You know, it kind of tears me up sometimes. He sent His Son, said, die. I mean, how many parents do we have in here? I mean, think about that. I had a kid in the ER, and it's always interesting when you show up in the ER. I always try to figure out what's going on. And so the story that I heard was a 7-year-old. I show up and it's a 4-year-old with 4 years, 7 months. And I'm like, okay, so this is a little different scenario. You know, the kid's not this big, the kid's this big. And so it's this 4-year-old, and so I go in there, and the guy that's holding him is, I put him at 40, maybe something, maybe 45. He's holding him, and the kid's not stressed at all. He's having a great time, you know. And I'm like, what's going on? What are we doing here? So then I look at the kid a little more, and like, sure enough, there's a little cut right here by his eye. And so, you know, just a little bit scan the room, and I'm like, there's somebody over here, looks like maybe 10, 11, something like that, and then there's somebody over here that's like maybe 6 or 7, and then there's 2 other girls that I don't really know. I mean, they could be 12, they could be 20. You know, it's, you know, I didn't really get a sense of it. And so I automatically assumed this was Dad that was holding the kid. And I couldn't quite put it together, which one was Mom and which one was daughter, and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So mistakenly, I started talking to the guy that was holding the kid, you know, and I just assumed this was Dad, started talking to him and stuff, yeah. And I'm like, well, you know, the time to get the stitches in, you know, put the kid to sleep so I can get these stitches in. And so I said, well, Dad, you know, maybe we'll have you stay here, and then, you know, everybody else kind of step out because we got a lot of stuff to bring in this small room. He's like, I'm not Dad. I'm like, you're the only guy here. No, this is Grandpa. This is Grandpa holding the kid. And then I'm like, well, where's Mom? And then, you know, she's like, pick me, you know, sitting in the corner. And I'm like, oh, she looks like she's like 12. And so then I figured out that that's the mom, this is the grandpa, and then this is, I think, one of her daughters, and then the other one is the other daughter, which is kind of looks like the same age. But anyway, to sort all that and put that together, the guy that was holding on to the kid definitely had the biggest connection with him. And he had the most emotional attachment. And when Mom left, the kid really didn't care too much. But boy, Grandpa's not leaving until I go to sleep, kind of a deal. And so we put him to sleep in Grandpa's arms, and then we laid him down and got the stitches in. Our Heavenly Father sent His Son. And more than anything this last winter, that's what taught me. Ellen White says, think about Christ's life, especially the closing moments. Sending your Son to die. Anyway, last weekend, we weren't here, or I wasn't here, but my family was here, and apparently you guys had a good time outside with the wonderful creation, and maybe a little issue with the tent, but I heard it was fun and exciting. I happen to be in the ICU, and sometimes, you know, when the things don't quite line up just right, I have to be in the ICU and I have to be in the OR, and I think for 5 days I was away from the hospital a total of like, you know, 12 hours or 15 hours or something like that. But just my little comment on that is, there's no atheist in the ICU, number one. Number two, unlike Hezekiah, we don't know how long we live. Had a family gather around their loved one, was admitted after surgery from a lung biopsy. She wasn't breathing so well. She had some kind of issues with lung. And so we took her to the OR, took a tiny little piece of the tissue, sent it to the pathologist saying, you know, what is it? You know, is this, you know, some kind of a respiratory asthma, or is it some kind of a COPD, or is this a sarcoid fibrosis, tumor, cancer, etc.? After surgery, she didn't do too bad. She did pretty well and was getting ready to go home, and then all of a sudden she got more and more hypoxic. We had to have her more and more oxygen. Within 4 hours, she was in the ICU on the ventilator with very high peak pressures. Very high oxygen concentrations, and for 14 days we basically tried our hardest to get her enough oxygen so that she could live. I don't think I've ever had to ventilate or provide as much support to a patient in that capacity in 10 years. One of those nights last week, I said, Lord, you're going to have to do something. All the stuff that I have done is not making a difference. You know, we do this therapy, and then we do this therapy, and then we try this, and then we try this, and nothing happens. I prayed. It was like, maybe it was on a Thursday night, and I think Friday morning she was better. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome, you know? God does answer prayers. He does care about us. Then Saturday she was worse. Saturday afternoon she was worse, and by then we had all kind of realized that the situation was not going to get better, and she didn't make it out of the hospital. She had a lot of things that she wanted to do in life. She had a lot of stuff that she wanted to accomplish, and so I guess my point is not to be down and depressed, but we don't have a specific number of days. We're not guaranteed time. Spend your time like it could be your last day. Like it could be tomorrow you're in the ICU and you don't make it out. We don't have the luxury of knowing our days. Don't count your days, but make your days count. Last weekend, that was my ICU. The weekend before that, I was in Little Sahara. And if you've ever been, how many people have been to a desert? Well, we got a good number of people. How many of you have been to a desert that's like big desert? Well, a good number of people. When I go to Little Sahara, and this has kind of hit me the last couple of times, 2 weekends ago, Sabbath evening, we're at the top of the dune. The dune is probably, how tall do you think that is, Caleb? 100 feet? 150 feet? 150 feet, and it's basically a pile of sand as steep and as tall as you can pile sand. It kind of looks like a big pile of corn, but it's sand. And so at the very top, we're sitting up there, the sun is going down, it's a gorgeous day, it's nice, it's quiet, it's warm, it's peaceful, and the sun is just beginning to set. And here's what I'm thinking about. God made this sand for no other purpose. Because what does sand do? You can grow corn on sand? Can you grow trees on sand? Can you eat it? Can you build a house out of it? Why is it there?
Make concrete out of it.
Make concrete out of it, yeah, exactly. So God made this gorgeous site, this gorgeous spot just for me. Just so that I could enjoy it as the sun was going down. One other thought about this last weekend, we were at Little Sahara. For 40 years, God taught the Israelites out of nothing but sand. I mean, if you spend some time in the sand, I mean, there's no trees, now this particular time, it rained, and there was a lot of ponds, but I mean, there is nothing in Little Sahara but sand. I mean, there's no grass, there's no trees, there's no water, there's nothing. It's hot, it's cold, it's just sand. For 40 years, the faith of the Israelites was tested in sand. I was there for one day, and I'm like, okay, it's time to go to the camper where the air conditioner is. One more quick lesson, and then I want to kind of go on here a little bit. But as I've been away from the church, I just had to recount the weekend, just recount the time. When you're in the ICU, you don't have the luxury of knowing your days, and so I just had to recount the days. The weekend before that, we were at camp meeting. How many people went to camp meeting? Excellent, wonderful. Camp meeting is a great time to connect with other Adventists, to be blessed, to be refilled, to be reconnected. And we had the opportunity with Sandoval to teach the youth Saturday night. Did some kind of fun stuff. What I guess my point, my thought process back to that is, your Adventist church is sound. Those kids in that youth department love God. And they love God wholeheartedly. And they are very smart, they are very bright, and they just can't wait to get old enough to serve Him. It's an awesome thing to see. It's an awesome thing to see what God does with our kids, with our youth. That's the future of our church. But anyway, the weekend before that, we were here, and it was good to be here. Not too long before that weekend, I was up here again, and I was actually teaching and preaching. Anybody remember what I was teaching and preaching about? Now you're going to scratch your head. The last time I actually stood on this stage and I was talking and preaching, something happened. What happened?
You paid us.
What?
You paid us.
There was a talk. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. Okay. All of a sudden I have the teenagers' attention. I mean, what is it? They're like distracted until I get my billfold, and now I have the teenagers' attention. So, last time I had a sermon, we started talking about this. And now you're saying, oh my goodness, Wheeling's talking about money again. What is the deal? Does he have nothing else to talk about? Remember that sermon? Remember what happened? Remember what we did? Remember what happened at the end? Everybody remembers that. Everybody remembers like, oh yeah, I remember that. What did you think about? What did that make you think? How did that impact you? For those of you who weren't here, the last time I preached, last time I teach was about money and about my kind of journey through the last 20 years and my idea of money and how it impacts me and how it affects our relationship with God. And then in the end, I did a little experiment. We're gonna look at today the results or the when you're reading scientific literature. I read so much scientific literature. The first thing is like the introduction, and then it's the methods, and then it's the results, and then the very last, which is the important part, is the discussion. What did the scientific study actually teach? And so that is part of today, the discussion. What actually do we do differently because of the lesson? And so I want to go through, there's several amazing stories that we got to get to about what happened because of that. For those of you who weren't here, everybody who was old, adult, got a $5 bill. Everybody that was younger, or youth or kid, got a $1 bill. And those of you who did get the money were having very specific instructions. You had to use that money for God. That's it. That's all you had to do. But before we talk about those amazing stories, before we get into that, before we talk about the discussion session, I want to back roll just a little bit as to why this is so important. Why is it important that of all the topics in the entire Bible that we talk about money? Money, is it really that important? Is it really that, did God really have a lot to say? Did he really have a lot of teachings on money? Devote 2 whole sermons on money? Some women may not understand, and I'm just going to get myself in trouble here. Last night I was talking to Sherry a little bit about this, and I got a little bit of evil looks, but not too much. Some women probably don't understand how much money impacts men. And maybe this is just my man or me, but in my world, in my life, success is measured by dollars. I mean, how many times do you go and brag to your friends or something like, you know what, I got a great job. My great job pays me $2 an hour. I mean, how much do we do that? I mean, you know what, I got a great deal on this truck. This truck is probably worth $12,000. I got it for $9. I mean, that's what guys do, right? I mean, for some reason, maybe it's just me, but worth is more equated to money than it is to much else. And there's a lot of guys that are that way. So today I'm going to ask you the question. In medicine, when we want to find out what's wrong, we do a biopsy. I told you about a lung biopsy. Today I'm going to ask you, pull your wallet out. Let's biopsy your wallet. What's in there? What does this show you or tell you about your relationship with God? Women, on the other hand, I think are less affected by it. I think women are more relational. They're more concerned about, you know, when they get a job, it's like, well, are my coworkers fun to work with? Or is it kind of a fun job? Or is it something that, you know, I can be appreciated at work? And I went through some studies and some data on this, but typically women make less than men. And we're not really sure why, because they do the same jobs and they kind of have the same kind of education and the same opportunities. Some say that maybe not, but typically women are less concerned about how much money the job pays and more concerned about the people that they're working with. So, CBS News 2014 had a poll. Recent poll, 2014 CBS News. Money contributes the leading cause of stress for Americans. Let me say that again. Let me rephrase it. The number 1 cause of stress in America is money. Are we in America?
Yes.
Money continues to be the leading cause of stress for America. The survey finds financial worries serve a significant source of stress for 64% of adults in 2014. Ranking higher than other sources of stress, which are family, health, and work. Money outranks them all. Number 1 source of stress, 64% of Americans are concerned about money. Nearly 3 out of 4 adults report feeling stressed about money, or at least some of the time. About 1 in 4 adults say they experience extreme stress over money during the past month, according to this poll. Almost 1/3 of adults with partners report that money is a major source of conflict between them. So is money really that important? Apparently it's the number 1 cause of stress in America. Does God have anything to say about that? Is there anything in here? You know, we talked last time I was up here preaching, we talked just a little bit about it. We didn't go too much into this, but is there anything in here that says, hey, this is what you need to know about money? Maybe it's that we're just too focused on money. Maybe we're just too excited. Maybe we're just too money grubbers. Maybe God just wants us not to worry about that. Is that true? Is that right? Well, let's look back in the Bible. Were rich people in the Bible? outside of God's blessings? Outside of God's kingdom?
I'm sure.
Some people say yes, some people say no. What about Abraham? Was he wealthy? He was probably the wealthiest guy in where was he at? And that's what it is. See, I'm getting old. He was the richest guy in Mesopotamia. He had cattle, he had land, he had servants, he had all kinds of measures of wealth. Was Abraham a follower of God? Did he know God pretty well? Must not be that. What about another guy? Who is the number one, or I should say this, who is the oldest guy in the Bible, or the oldest book of the New Testament? Was Job a guy that had some wealth?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did Job follow God? Well, if money, or the pursuit of money, is not the problem, or I guess the accumulation of money, because those are two examples of how people with the extreme amount of wealth followed God and did well. What is it? Deuteronomy 8:18 says, "Remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth." I'm going to read that again. Deuteronomy 8:18. "Remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth." Psalms 52:7. "God will bring ultimate destruction the man who did not make God his stronghold, but trusted in his great wealth." God will bring destruction to those that trust in their own wealth. Caleb read us a memory text in Luke. Luke 12:15. I won't ask if you guys still have that or turn to it, but we're going to kind of look at it just briefly here. Luke 12:15. And if you remember, 3 months ago, the last time I was up here, we also had this as our memory text. Luke 12, oh my, this is where it gets, Luke 12:15 to 21 is what I want to talk about here. The precursor is Jesus is preaching and teaching, and there's this guy that comes up in the crowd, and he asked the master a question. "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." I don't know anything about this guy, but I assume there's a brother out there that is feeling a little cheated because he didn't get half of the family estate. And so the guy's like, "You know what, I'm going to go to this really smart guy," and he says yes. People call in to talk shows, and they kind of ask questions like, "What should I do?" And if you get the talk show host on your side, then you can say, "Hey, great, wonderful, he sides with me. That's what should happen." Jesus replied, "Watch out. Be on guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist of the abundance of his possessions." And then he told a story. When Jesus tells stories, we call them parables in the Bible. Here's the story. A certain man, a rich man, produced a good crop. He thought to himself, "What should I do? I have no place to store my crops." And then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my grain and all my goods. And I will say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, drink, and be merry." Verse 20, God says, "You fool." God calls you a fool. Better pay attention. "This very night your life will be demanded from you, and then who will get what you have prepared?" This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich towards God. You fool. Are there any other texts? Are there anything else in the Bible that talk about money? Maybe that's just an isolated event. Is there anything else that discusses money? What about the rich young ruler? What about the widow's mite? Maybe there's a bunch more parables. There are supposedly 11 out of 39 parables in the Bible that actually teach about money. Luke 7:42, the two debtors. Luke 10:25, the Good Samaritan. The wise and the foolish builders in Matthew 7:24. The friend at night, 11:5. Parable of the pearl, 13:34. The hidden treasure, 13:11 in Matthew. The lost coin, the wedding feast, the parable of the talents or the minas. Does the Bible have anything to say about money? One out of 7 verses in the book of Luke talk about money. 1 out of 7 verses in the whole Gospel of Luke talk about money. Matthew 6:21. I'm going to read that just quickly here. Matthew 6:21. Read it with my glasses. Store up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, where thieves do not break and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So it's not so much that we have money, or that we have accumulated assets or wealth, but who has your heart? Title of the sermon. Where's your heart? If we did your wallet biopsy, what would it show? Back to 4 months ago, I told a little story that got me inspired to do this. In March of 1996, the First Baptist Church in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, was finishing a 3-year fundraising campaign. 3 laymen, unbeknownst to each other, sensed that God was leading their church to move on 120 acres that it had purchased 4 years before for a church plant. During a testimony service one week, each man was impressed by God, and the congregation flocked en masse to the altar seeking forgiveness, not being obedient in giving as they believed God had directed. Garland talked about the plans for the building project and for the new property located adjacent to a busy suburban street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This would require several $million that had been promised and raised, but not given, after an extensive fund drive. I was ready for something different, Garland says. The traditional church building committee for this 5,000-member church was coming off a stirring revival, and Garland knew his congregation was sensitive to God's leading. While praying, Garland felt God impressing him to do something he'd heard about but never felt led to do. Implement the talents and teach people stewardship and raise the additional funds. So, on the first Sunday in June of 1996, Garland preached the Matthew 25 sermon. The ushers gave each person in attendance talents to take. Invest, return later with profits. $10 was given to each person in high school age or older. Junior high students got 5 and elementary kids got 1. $15,000 were distributed in all. We didn't want to leave any room for criticism, Garland said. In the weeks that followed, some of the church members used their talents to make crafts for a church fair. A local newspaper even ran a lengthy feature about the talents of the projects. Like many children, Kelly Leach, the first grader, put her dollars toward a lemonade stand and offered lemonade to golfers on a course near her home. Since the rules forbade selling and soliciting, she simply displayed a picture of the planned church buildings and put out a donation cup and said, "Support." She got $126 from her dollar of lemonade mix. Even visitors to the church returned their money. One couple from Texas sent back $240, Garland said. Hoping to keep the congregation in reproach from the community, Garland included the bulletin, the 10 Commandments regarding talents. For example, the 5th commandment tells participants to render services that are exceedingly and abundantly above expectations. The 1st commandment warns against using talents that would venture or dishonor God in any way. Others say, "Thou shalt not do anything that would become irritating to your neighbors, family, or friends." Though the congregation was enthusiastic about the unusual stewardship process, Garland wished to remind them that it was not simply a gimmick to raise money. 8 weeks after distributing the talents, they got bracelets to remind members to the church that the talent project was still ongoing, and to go share Christ through these fundraising efforts. One bracelet was so effective that the businessman wore it to work. Among his employees, one of them asked, "Hey, what's that?" Others wore it on overseas mission trips. Some people saw the bracelets and inquired to the church. Here's what happened. 6 months later, that 15,000 turned to 400,000. Parable of the talents. So 4 months ago, I gave each adult $5, every child $1, with no rules, no expectations. You just have to use it for God. I got a lot of questions. I got a lot of, "What are you doing?" I even got some people who said, "Oh, I can't do that. Give it back. Put it in the offering plate." Many people ask, "What am I supposed to do with that?" So then I waited. What's God going to do? I started to hear just a few people talking about this, and people were like, Exciting stories. God was also working on me. Here's what I found out. I'm going to have Sherry come up here. She's going to represent a couple of different things. But first I'm going to ask you about you personally. Look at my notes. Oh, you should trust me. Okay, so when you got the $5, what did you think?
Easy peasy.
As in?
It should be easy to find something to do with $5.
It should be easy to find something to do with $5. How'd that make you feel?
Responsible.
Did you like that feeling?
I mean, you should feel good. You got extra $5 in your pocket, but I felt like it was God's money, and I felt this. You should know that's still sitting in my wallet.
What was your initial plan once you kind of thought about it and kind of got down the road to do with that $5?
What I wanted to do was take the $5 and go make cupcakes, and I even researched a couple different ministries. As the Lord's been impressed upon my heart, I want to support organizations that help women that have been enslaved by, what's the word for it? Slavery. Sex trade. There's a group in Omaha. I was looking for an Adventist one, and I couldn't find. I spent a lot of time. I just couldn't find a group I wanted to support. And my idea was to take the cupcakes to work, which was actually his work, and put them out on the counter with a free will donation with like a sign that says this is what your donation would support. But I was just like, well, that's weird. People are going to wonder, are they going to steal the money, or are they going to just take the cupcakes? And then I was like, well, if they take the cupcake, I guess that's fine. And so I just round and round and round I go, and the $5 is still in my wallet.
So you didn't do it. But then what happened?
Well, you pointed it out.
So,
I didn't think it was an opportunity, but it was.
how long ago? 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, something happened. Something came up. What was that?
We had a friend that had had an impulse to help another friend who had been in the hospital, and she went ahead and ordered all this crushed concrete to help her friend's driveway, and didn't think anything of it. She had some people donate labor and everything, and then she got the bill and realized that she had overcommitted herself big time. And so she came to Merlin and I and asked for help to make up the difference. And so I said, of course. I loved her heart and what she was doing for a friend. And so I didn't realize it at the time that I was using my $5, just not in the way I anticipated.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead and sit down for a little while. Does God not know about the $5? Do you think He knows? Do you think He puts people in your path? You know, it's interesting. So many times in my life, I'm like, God, this is a great opportunity. Let's do this. You know, all of these schemes and all these plans and all this and that and this and that. And then none of it kind of comes out. None of it works. And then all of a sudden, you're just kind of going along, and boom, it lands there. And you're like, well, I wasn't ready for that. I'm not planning on that. But more and more, God is teaching me. I work here. I don't work like all of these schemes or plans that you have great, wonderful ideas. My plan is here. You just work right here and it'll be all fine. Sometimes we think we need to scheme or plan up something big to be used by God. Sometimes we think we have to be impressive to God. God, look what I'm going to do for you with your talents, your money. God's already big enough. He doesn't need us to make Him bigger. All He wants is yes. He will put things in front of us. All we have to do is recognize it and say yes. Spend time in prayer so that we can hear and recognize what He puts in front of us. So that's pretty cool, isn't it? I think that's all right. That's pretty cool. So, another story. I'm downstairs over there, and I'm here for some reason. I can't remember what I'm here for, but I think I'm eating, and I'm really distracted. You know, the person that's across from me is talking to me, but I'm really not paying attention to them. I'm trying to pay attention, but it's not really getting there. What I'm trying to pay attention to is the guy that's talking over there. And the guy that's talking over there is like saying something really cool. And I'm like, man, I can't quite hear things. I need to like scoot over a little bit, you know. And I'm trying to hear that conversation. And sure enough, when this conversation is done, I go over and I talk with him. Because I can't wait to hear that story. The story goes something like this. You gave me $5, and I didn't know what to do with it. Okay, so then what? Well, I didn't really know. I didn't have a clue. And so you said something about Amazon. So I bought Amazon stock. Okay. You ever bought stock before? No. You ever invest before? No. Not like that. But I figured God wanted me to put some more money with it, so I did. Okay. Here's $800. Wait a minute. I'm like, all right, back up for a little bit. You got $800 by investing in Amazon stock? Well, yeah. He's like, I put that $5 with some money I had, and I put it in Amazon. You said Amazon was a good stock, so buy it. He's like, it went up a bunch. And I'm like, yeah, I know it did. And he said, so here, I sold it. Okay. And then I'm like, well, what do I do with that money? So the money went to Camp Arrowhead.
Amen.
Cool, isn't it? Isn't that cool? Somebody who doesn't invest, somebody who doesn't know about that, like, well, I don't know, God, what do you want me to do with it? All right, fine. All we have to do is say yes. All we have to do is follow Him. It's not as complicated as we like to think it is. It's not as complicated as we want to make it out to be. All right, I got somebody else that wants to come up here. Tanya, come on up. She has a little story that she's going to say. And then I have a little story that I want to talk about. So, Tanya's a little bit on the spot. I told her I was going to ask her questions today, but she didn't really. So, Tanya, back to the original. What did it make you feel when you got $5 in church?
Pressure.
Pressure.
I just felt like, what am I going to do with this money? I can't just go spend it. I have to do something for that.
Yeah. Okay. So you felt pressure, you felt like you had to do something. What did that initially thought you were going to do with it?
My mind went blank. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought, what do you do with $5? It just didn't seem that much to me. And so I prayed.
Prayed. Okay, so as you prayed, what started happening then?
Well, I was thinking about your story, about how you started to think about investing, giving a percentage of your income just to help others. And then soon after that, Evan and I were in Menards and we went into Mike. And Mike walked through the door. Menards was like, hey, what are you doing this morning? And he's like, I'm out here spending God's money. And I thought about that and I was like, wow, when you start thinking that your money is God's money, it really starts making me think of how you spend it.
Right.
And so that stuck with me. And so Evan and I had been just kind of brainstorming. We have decided with the sale of our house, which keeps getting pushed back and back and back, so I think there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, but the profits that we make from it, we're going to put a certain percentage away. So the $5 that we each got is going to be opening a bank account and just putting a percentage of our profit to have an account to help others.
Awesome! Isn't that wonderful? Thank you. Thank you for sharing. God takes the little opportunity that we have saying, this is your money, it's not mine, God. What do you want me to do with it? And all of a sudden, the stuff happens, boom, it's right here, and you're like, I don't really remember thinking about that. I don't remember kind of planning for that. Where'd that come from? Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Good stories, good stuff. I'm going to have Sherry come up, and she's going to tell one more story about another church member. And so we're going to kind of pretend that she's that person now. So it's not Sherry, she's that person. And so this person is done some amazing things, some exciting things. So what did this person do, or what was this person's motivation, or what were they thinking about with that $5?
Well, I think like Tanya and I, she was impressed that she had to do something with it, and she wanted to see it grow.
Okay. So how long was it before, from the time that we were in church, before kind of that idea kind of came to her?
I think pretty quickly. She knew of a family that had 2 young children that had medical issues, and that's always been on her heart. So she wanted to take that money and see it grow so she could support that family.
So she had an idea about supporting a family. Then, what happened with that idea as she started going down that path?
Well, she first went to her, and this is probably going to give her away, but she went to her bank friends, and she told them what she got in church and how she was impressed God wanted her to use that money. And they said, we want to give too. So they gave to her little $5 fund, and then she went to her Tuesday morning Bible study group here in Kearney, told them the story of what happened in church and who she wanted to support, and they gave to that fund again. And then she went to her Awanas friends, told them what happened in church, and they wanted to give to the fund. And she ended up raising $1,200 to support that family.
No, thank you, thank you. So, isn't that cool? I mean, isn't that awesome? God does, when we open up the door, God has an opportunity to work. He has an opportunity to lead in our lives, to lead in other people's lives. And I think that was such a great story because, it's not just us sometimes. God has kind of sometimes lined these things up, and all you got to do is just start that process. Yes, Lord, I will contribute to this fund, and then all of a sudden, $1,200 later, it's a real deal. Real stuff happens. We're going to close here with one last story because we got to kind of wrap up. God is big. God has big things in mind. Sometimes those big things are in small packages. Sometimes those big things are in big packages. So long before I preached this sermon, my parents go to Texas every year, and this year they kind of got the crazy idea that they want to go to Mexico. Not just like, walk across the border like they kind of do, but they wanted to go kind of deep into Mexico. So they were going to All Nations Church, sitting there at lunch, and they were talking to this guy across the table, and he started talking about the university, the Adventist University in Morelos, Mexico. It's a university that trains medical students and other health people. Also have a little hospital there. But most importantly, they train evangelists to evangelize the world. So he's talking about this and how he's kind of a semi-retired professor at this university. And so my dad's like, I'd like to go. He's like, I'll get you there. He doesn't even know where it is or anything. He's like, yeah, I'll take you there. My mom's like trying to kick him, like, no, we're not going to Mexico. We're not going down there. So anyway, fast forward the clock just a little bit. And a month later, they're getting on a bus, headed 3.5 hours south into the town of Morelos. They have never been outside the country. They don't really know what they're doing. And this is about the time that the Trump plane lands at the border. And there's a lot of people and protests. And if you remember, kind of last winter, there was quite a bit of controversy that was going on. Anyway, they're like, okay, we're going to Mexico. So when they got there, this professor had lined up the director of human relations or something like that, or public relations, and they just treated them like royalty. They wined and dined, they showed them all around, they got all the transportation lined up, had a great time. During that event, they ran into an OBGYN doc, and they immediate conversation. Well, hey, my son's a doc, he's in Carney, and he's an anesthesiologist, and so they start talking and stuff, and my dad immediately starts talking about this medical device, and that conversation got into like, oh, well, can you come down here and help us out? And it's a medical device to put in baby fistulas for dialysis. They're like, well, yeah, he's got to come down here and do some fistulas. And so I'm in the OR, it's about 10 in the morning, and I get this phone call from this person that doesn't know very good English, and they're trying to convince me to come down to Mexico and place some fistulas. And I'm like, what on earth is this going on? At first I thought it was a prank phone call, but knowing my dad, then I kind of put the connection together. He's, he does these things. So, time to work on that. Trying to really get that going. I mean, we tried to get tickets there. It didn't really work. It was spring break, and I wanted my kids to go. I got some presentations lined up, or do some education. Just didn't work. Finally, I preached this sermon, and the bells and whistles went on. They don't necessarily need you, they need some help. And so I called them up and like, you guys need an ultrasound? Because that's what you guys were talking about, ultrasound. Oh yeah, we need an ultrasound. I'm like, I just bought one for the hospital, that's pretty cheap. I know how to get these things. And so then a couple of emails or text messages back and forth, I'm like, I think these people really need an ultrasound. And Sherry's like, oh yeah, this is a big university, they got ultrasounds there. I wrote back, you guys really need an ultrasound? You need this summer site? And yeah, we do. And so anyway, because I just bought one for Kearney Regional, I kind of knew where to get one and all that stuff. The real struggle that I kind of had initially was, how do you buy a Spanish ultrasound in America? So I'm like, Then there was like a little thing like, is there enough people that know Spanish that they can actually use this thing down there? And then it's not. So fast forward the clock a little bit. I got a great deal on an ultrasound machine. Got it home. Had to do a little bit of change up and stuff. But it was both beneficial for Kearney Regional as well as for these guys. And so the ultrasound came, and we had to do a little bit of work, a little bit of updates, and all that fun stuff. Just Tuesday, I sent a letter to the, the government to be able to integrate this legally as a gift to the university, and they're going to start using this ultrasound next week. Yeah, and it's both for cardiac, line placements, trauma, as well as for OB.
They have no ultrasound.
And so this will be the only ultrasound in the entire university. And so I use ultrasound every day. At Kearney Regional, we have 4 of them, and they're all 4 to use pretty much all the time. They don't have one. And so, anyway, the point of the story is God had lined up all of this kind of stuff even before I had even knew about it. I didn't know I was going to buy an ultrasound. I didn't know I was going to donate an ultrasound to the University of Montreal. But he did. He knew they needed it. And I didn't really put the pieces together until I say, if I'm asking the people in church to give their $5 to a project, what am I going to do? And then all of a sudden, like, duh, you're going to buy an ultrasound. Like, okay, God, I'm going to buy an ultrasound. All right. Is God interested in your money? No. Is God interested if money is your God? Very much so. Is God allowing, do rich people have as much access to God as poor people? Yes. But what is God interested in? Right there. Where's your heart? The 4 stories that we heard about from the $5 prove that our heart is in the right spot. Sometimes you wonder, are you following God? I wonder, am I in God's will? Is what I'm doing God's plan? Absolutely. Absolutely. You are right in the center of where God wants you to be. The stories that we heard this morning prove that God is right here and right at work, right with our lives every day. All right, I want to close with the very last verse I want to close here. And in Matthew, we read this before. But store up for yourself treasure. Do not store for yourself treasure on earth, where moth, rust, destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, where thieves cannot break in and cannot steal. For where your treasure is, your heart will be also.